Hey up, back to the world of depravity and sleazy grot this episode as we take a look at Faces of Death 2. This is the 1981 Mondo sequel to the 1978 original, again directed by John Allen Schwartz and again starring Michael Carr as Dr. Gross. This is the copy that I had as a teenager, and I have seen it before, although I can't really remember much about it outside of the odd snippet here and there. And this is as far as I've ever got with the Faces of Death series. So the other two in the collection are going to be completely new to me. Not that I can really remember much about this anyway, to be honest. We will be referring back to the original quite a bit in this, which I did review recently on my channel. If you haven't seen my review of the original Faces of Death, I would strongly suggest checking that one out before watching this, as there's probably going to be quite a bit of comparison in this video, as you can imagine. So I'll put a link to it. A link should have popped up by now for it, so you can check that out. Lastly as well, before we move on, this is a Faces of Death film, so the clips are going to be a little sparse, so I do apologise for that. I'll try my best to show stuff where I can, but there's not going to be a hell of a lot of this film that I can show, so I do apologise. But anyway, let's crack on, shall we?
If you disagree with me, I'll prove my point. After the initial flash, the soldiers were instructed to face the mushroom cloud. They would later report a sensation of great heat, much like... When the warmth of springtime begins to melt the snow...
Much like the first film, this doesn't have much structure to it. Again, it's trying to emulate delving into the archives that Dr. Gross has collected of various scenes of death and suffering from around the world. In this instalment, we get boxing, stunts gone wrong, napalm, leprosy, animal slaughtering and testing, firing squads, and a whole lot more lovely images that you just can't wait to see. All narrated over by the good doctor himself, Dr. Gross. It's more of the same. It's more of the same. I felt that this one was a little tighter with its pacing, which is good and bad. We'll get into that a bit later on. It only comes in at 76 minutes, this one though, so it's a much brisker watch, which is definitely a positive, I'd say. It doesn't really have much time to completely overstay its welcome. Tonally though, it's a little different, but yeah, it's basically Faces of Death DLC.
The air quality has become so severe that the cleansing winds of North America are now contaminated. And what price will the next generation have to pay? Because of its superior intelligence, the dolphin has been trained to perform various tricks in marine parks all over the world.
Dr. Gross's voice work is a little less quippy and a little more matter-of-fact in this one compared to the original. It still works, he's still got a good voice for the narration and such, but it does lead to this feeling a little drier, I guess, than the first one. We also get the return of the messages of the film. You know, it's very anti-littering, anti-pollution, animal testing and stuff like that. So it is trying to shove some sort of agenda, and again, it does feel a little disingenuous with this being a shock film. It's like it's trying to do it, it's trying to have its cake and eat it too, isn't it, with this? But yeah, it makes its return here. I said that this film had a quicker pace, and it definitely does, because within the first 12 minutes Dr. Gross had already covered 10 topics. It's very rapid fire, and it kind of glosses over some things. Now, on the one hand, you could say, well, that's good because I don't have to sit with these horrible ideas and things for much time. But on the other hand, it's like, if you're gonna just rush past it that fast, why even bring it up in the first place? I don't know. There's a lot of this film that it feels just sort of slapped together. Here's this, here's this, here's this, and it's like, chill the fuck out a minute and let me just absorb some of this. On the other hand, though, we do have some scenes that are sort of played out a little longer, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here. The boxing section is quite long. The stuntman section goes on for a bit. And what's weird about that is, there's 3 topics in the stuntman section. There's 3 guys that it focuses on. Only one of them dies, and the other 2, I don't know, they just get a little injured, and it's like, why are we focusing on these other 2? It feels like it's padding it out a little bit. And lastly, it focuses quite a lot on the last section with the firing squad executions. We get to see the trial beforehand and stuff, and it's a little interesting, I'm not going to lie, it can be quite interesting. But that's how we play this film out. Gone is the nice nature shots and chipper music, and instead we're just left with slow motion footage post-execution. I think that sets the tone for this, and that leads me nicely into this next bit. I don't know if it was the footage used, the brisk pace of it all, the more matter-of-fact nature of it, or some sort of combination of all of it. But I found this film a lot more upsetting to watch than the original. It's harder to pick out the fake stuff with the real stuff, and it just feels a lot sadder. I don't know, it does show some pretty horrific stuff as well. There's some dead kids in it and stuff like that. I don't know. It's, in some ways it's better than the first film, and in some ways it's worse, I'd say. It's shorter, it's brisker, it's more shocking in parts, I guess. It's more shocking in parts, but it's also not as shocking because it's a sequel and we've seen the first one. So we kind of know what we're getting into, we kind of understand it. But some of the stuff it shows is a little more like, oof, my god, what the fuck are we seeing here? And also, again, it is just sort of slapped together. It feels more like an afterthought in parts. It's a really mixed bag, and it's difficult to talk about this one.
There's a ramp-to-ramp jump with this pickup truck covering a distance of 98 feet.
Boxing is a tough racket. It's very tough. 3 minutes in the ring of actual fighting is much more difficult than 2 weeks of hard training.
So this is a cut version of this film. Apparently there are 3 scenes missing. And yeah, reading about them on the BBFC website, I'm fine with that. Don't need to see them really. So, I said earlier that this film feels like it has more real footage in it. Now, I've tried doing research online. There's not as much information about this one than there is the first one, knocking about online. I'd have to guess that most of this is real footage. I found that the PCP shootout was definitely fake, and yeah, of course, the acting is shit in this bit. You can kind of tell from the get-go that bit's faked. And I also think, I haven't read this online, but I also think, I don't believe the head in the jar guy. Now, he may believe that it's a real head in a jar, but I have my suspicions that he got scammed. I might be completely wrong about that, but I don't know. I didn't really believe that one. I might be wrong. I've never seen a real head in a jar, so what do I know? I said in my last Faces of Death review that 60% of the original Faces of Death was real footage. Now, I've had quite a few comments saying, no, most of it's fake. Most of the deaths are fake, but the deaths only make up about 20 to 25% of the film. The rest of the film is just real footage. Nothing's happening in it, it's not death scenes, it's just boring stuff, but it is real footage, and that's how they get away with saying that most of it is real. One thing that's heavily missing from Faces of Death 2 is sort of like the lighter, the sillier, wackier moments. The first one had things like the snake cult and the Satanists and stuff like that. Faces of Death 2 doesn't really have anything like that. The wackiest is probably the stunt stuff, and it's not that over the top. The rest of it is just like war crimes and illnesses, and it's heavy. It's very, very heavy. Lastly, I'm going to mention the trailer. There's a trailer for this film on the disc, and I was kind of interested, how are they going to advertise this film? And, well, they do it with a very campy opening and then a Faces of Death song. It's not really advertising this film, though. It looks like it's a trailer. I can't remember the name of the company. It's like Gorgon, I think. It looks like it's a trailer for the Faces of Death series as a whole, because there's clips from the first one, and there's clips I hadn't seen before, so I'm guessing they're from the third and fourth one. But it made me chuckle, and I'm probably going to be using it for clips, because it's hard to show clips from this film.
Together, let us gaze into the many faces of death.
Faces of death all around me. Faces of death, faces of death, faces of death all around me.
Okay, time for the print. It's kind of what you'd expect. It's not too dissimilar to the first Faces of Death. It's in 4:3 and it's a little grainy at points. I noticed a VHS flicker at one instance as well. Also, the audio's a little worse here. The past two that I've talked about, the audio's sort of distorted. It's got a little, it like peaks. And it does do it, it's not a lot in here, it doesn't ruin the film or anything, but it can be a little noticeable during some of the narration scenes. Again though, the low quality of these, it does kind of add to the experience. It does make it feel like you're watching something that you found at the side of the road, which I think is what it wants. I don't think you'd want a cleaned up Blu-ray version of it all. And on the disc, usual stuff yet again, chapter select, trailer for this film that I've already talked about, and more Hard Gore trailers, of course. Okay, time for the case. Again, this one follows the format of the first case, this time adding a nose to the face on the front. I really do like the designs of these, it's so cool. It does kind of make it feel like something you shouldn't be holding or looking at. The back is also very similar, with the hard to make out list of what's featured in it. Very effective. Inside we have a slightly larger catalogue of other Hard Gore releases. I think this is the first time seeing this variation of it, and once again, this was a very important piece to me finding all the films in this collection. Overall again, much like the first one, it's difficult to talk about this film. It's not enjoyable. It's not meant to be enjoyable, but it is interesting. I found this one to be tighter and a heavier, more upsetting sit than the first film, but at the same time it feels a little slapped together in parts, and it does feel like it's retreading a lot of ground that we've already covered in the first film. I think I do prefer the first film. It's a little more shocking because you're going into it as a first film. If you saw this one first, you might prefer this one, but this is always going to be the sequel in my mind. The DLC, as I said earlier. It does kind of feel like an add-on, I guess. But if you want to watch Faces of Death and you want a shorter version of it, this might be the way to go. Realistically though, this is only going to speak to a certain sort of person. Someone who's into the Mondo shock docs, or their extreme horror, or just has a general fascination with death in general. If you're not one of those people, this film is not for you. If you are, you've probably already seen it, let's be fair. If you're in the market for this film, there's not a ton of options. This version isn't the worst. There is a US double bill with the first film. There's a few US imports and there's a few German imports as well. This is your lot for the UK release of it. And honestly, it's kind of shot up in price a little bit, so it kind of depends what you deem worth the money, really. It's definitely a little fascination piece, but I don't know if it's worth much. I'd say if you see it for cheap, it's probably worth buying to then sell on, because it goes for, you know, more than you'd want to pay for it, I guess. I got lucky because I got it as a teenager. So, another fascinating, difficult film this episode, and I think next episode we're getting a little bit of reprieve before we delve back in, and I think it's what we need. It might have the laughs and the light, humorous tone that we're looking for. Judging by the things on the back of it anyway, it looks like a silly one, and it's definitely got one of the stupidest covers in the entire collection. One that I've been looking forward to this one, I'm not gonna lie. Next episode, we are checking out The Boneyard.